Many of my clients have chosen to exclusively pump because the baby couldn't nurse. These moms, they really tried to nurse and they used to keep latching and it got very frustrating for them. And then people used to tell them that just give formula. Exclusively pumping turned out to be a great midway between nursing and bottle feeding. You actually don't even need to wash the pump parts after every pump. Power pumping is a fantastic way of improving your milk supply. And I'll tell you a very underrated advantage of exclusively pumping and having that schedule is that occasionally I could enjoy a glass of wine. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Modern Indian Parent Podcast. I'm Rinie, sleep consultant.
And I'm Sanchita, a pediatric nutrition consultant. And this is the podcast where we are redefining parenting in Indian families.
Every week, we bring you episodes that will help you own your modern parenting choices, even if Nani and Dadi don't agree with them. And today's episode is really special because we're taking a truly modern Indian parent take on an important aspect of your baby's life, which is breastfeeding. Now, one thing that Sanchita and I both did is that instead of nursing our babies, we did exclusive pumping, which is that we breastfed without actually nursing. And this is what we're going to share with you today. We're going to talk about our experiences. Why did we choose to exclusively pump? How did we go about it? Everything from our pumping schedules to how did we boost our milk supply. So stay tuned if you're somebody who's thinking about doing exclusive pumping to get the benefits of breast milk to your baby without having to nurse because you're facing any kind of issue with it.
So, Rinie, I want to know more about how did you come to the decision to exclusively pump? Like, did you actually try nursing for a bit?
Okay, so after my daughter was born, firstly, she was born in the middle of the COVID lockdown, right? There was a really strict lockdown. And, the stay in the hospital was already very isolating when we came back. My mom couldn't be here. My mother-in-law couldn't be here. And honestly, as a first-time mom, I just wasn't aware enough that I should have had a lactation consultant on board. So what happened is that we did face a fair amount of issues with latching because honestly, I just didn't know how to do it. Like we couldn't figure it out in the hospital because the nurses weren't particularly helpful. And even after we got home, we were just so overwhelmed by everything that, I couldn't figure out how to nurse and latch my baby directly. So in the meanwhile, just to be able to get my supply to come in, I started pumping very regularly. And that is kind of what the nurse and the hospital told me to do as well. It's like, while you're figuring out how to latch, start pumping. So at least your milk comes in, even if your baby isn't latching really well. Now, the amazing thing was when I did start pumping, by day 2, I started getting a fair amount of milk. Like I started getting the colostrum. By day 3, it was transitional milk. By day 4, day 5, I had a lot of milk coming in. When I saw that, and not only does it allow me to get a lot of milk to come in, anybody is able to feed my baby. At first, we're using this cup, that medicine cup, and then we used spoon for feeding for a bit. But then eventually we transitioned to a bottle. And then I was like, okay, this system is sort of working well for me. I continued to keep trying to latch her, but it just didn't work. So that's kind of like how I chose pumping. What about you, Sanch? Like, what was your journey with exclusive pumping?
So with my kids, they were in the NICU for a month. So basically, when I got home, I couldn't even hold my kids for the first 5 days. So there was no option nursing right away. So they said, okay, look, you're going to start producing some milk. So just pump. So automatically, I had to start doing it. So what I would do is every day I would just start pumping, and then I'd have to put the milk, whatever I would get, in these containers, label it twin 1, twin 2, take it to the hospital, and they would start offering it to the twins. And I finally got to hold them and try and latch on. Remember, there are 2 of them. So I even bought the twinsy pillow, which a lot of twin moms use to actually nurse both the babies at the same time. To try it, frustrated too because they weren't latching, and I was like, how is this direction? Like, what do you do? I remember reading the book by Gina Ford because she has a book on the feeding schedule. She has one for twins. Honestly, after reading that, I was like, I can't do this because it was literally like you hold one, you feed on each breast, then you get the other one and you feed, and literally in 20 minutes for the next feed. So for me, realistically, thing did not make sense. Just already we're feeding so often. I'm sure you felt that in the beginning, that was our priority. And then imagine doing it twice and then all over again. So from the beginning, it was, I think, is better. I do want to give them breast milk, but it was just such an easier option for me to do. So you know what? The nursing aspect of it, I know a lot of moms really like that whole experience. I don't know if it was just so overwhelming for me, but I didn't feel that connection. You know how they say you get that connection when you're nursing, and I hate to say it, but I didn't feel that connection. Instead, I experience, I wasn't feeling happy. I wasn't a easy decision to just move to direct pumping.
So much sense to me. And then trust me, Sanjana, you're not alone in feeling this way because I think right
Yeah.
after we have babies, and I felt this way too, I think there is that element of postpartum anxiety and even postpartum depression that kicks in. And some of us don't even realize that we have it. And one of the signs definitely could be that you don't enjoy the whole nursing experience. Like you want to, you know the benefits of nursing, but then it's not necessarily that it will translate into at the breast for like throughout the day because the babies in the newborn stage they nurse a lot, right? And they nurse so often with two babies. I mean, like you said, like every 20 minutes you would have a baby on your breast, and that would be 24 hours a day. I think that definitely would have been a big challenge for you. I'll tell you from my experience of working with clients as well. Many of them, my clients have chosen to exclusively pump, not just because it was that they couldn't figure it out how to nurse or they had twins, but it could be generally the baby couldn't nurse. There were restrictions with tongue ties or lip ties, or the mom's nipples weren't the most ideal for nursing. These moms, they really, really, really tried to nurse and they used to keep latching, and it got very frustrating for them. And then people used to tell them that, you know what, just give formula. And while there's nothing wrong with formula, right? Like I think both of us are true believers of that. There is absolutely nothing wrong with formula. But I think these moms really wanted to give breast milk for as long as they could, how much ever they could. And that's why for them, exclusively pumping turned out to be a great like midway between nursing and bottle feeding. And that's what I like. You know, I think feeding, there is this certain dichotomy to it. They think either you're breastfeeding or you're bottle feeding. And then when you think about bottle feeding, they only think of formula. But there is this very lovely midway that families can have where they're still giving breast milk, you know, and they enjoy, and the babies enjoy the benefits of breast milk while still there is that convenience and the ease of bottle feeding as well.
I think one of the pros of exclusive pumping for me, as I was able to know how much they're having, I was able to kind of create a little bit of a schedule because I know when you're nursing, you really do a bit more of on demand. Of course, you can create a schedule, but with exclusive pumping, I was like, writing it down, how many ml. Like I like that structure that exclusive pumping was giving me. So I knew, you know, keeping track of both. So then when I'd go to the doctor, it was very clear and easy for me, and especially because they were born mature. So I know one of the biggest cons for me was the amount of stuff that you needed. Right? Compared to nursing is just like you have a shawl, you're good to go. And I remember when I went home and I suddenly had to pump, I could feel like my chest, my breasts were getting very like hard. I was like crying and I was calling my husband's cousin like, what do I do? Like, because there's so many parts to the breast pump, and I was like, I don't know what to do, how to do this, and I didn't sterilize anything yet because it was an emergency C-section. So, and I was in pain. So for me, that was one of the cons. Like, just
And you know that stuff, like it's not cheap. Like I feel the
oh yeah,
amount of money that we spend on I bought two breast pumps. Like I had one of those like big breast pumps, a hospital grade kind. I had a wearable breast pump. You have to buy all the bottles, then you have to replace the valves, the tubing. You might need to get separate flanges. Like there is a fair bit of money that goes into this. Oh, not to mention the breast milk storage bags because they're like one-time use
okay,
bags, and you have to like kind of stock up on those. So I think definitely like it wasn't cheap, and but the washing,
yeah, the sterilizing, yeah,
oh my god, I needed like a double the size of a sterilizer because there was
yeah.
like the bottles plus the pump parts. Everything was going in. But you know, like something that I figured out much later on, which I wish I had figured out early, is that you actually don't need to sterilize after every cycle. I know like we are a bit paranoid
Yeah.
and we feel we need to sterilize after every cycle, but you don't actually need to. And that is something like a lactation consultant shared with me just like last year when I was talking to one of them. And I said, Are you kidding me? Like, I spent so much time sterilizing. And another hack that I got to know to kind of reduce the washing was that you actually don't even need to wash the pump parts after every pump. And again, I wish I had known this when I was exclusively pumping, is that, let's say it's middle of the night, right? Like, you're woken up at 3 a.m. to pump. The last thing you want to do after pumping is to like go into the kitchen and start washing and sterilizing. What you can do is literally put the pump parts in a Ziploc bag
Yeah.
and put it in the fridge.
Put in the fridge.
And
That's
done.
what I did.
And
Exactly. That's what I did.
really?
Yeah. Yeah. I had the bottle and it was connected to the and then the flange. And then basically I'd pump and then I'd put that whole thing in the Ziploc and then empty the milk, into a container and then close it back and keep that whole setup. Just put it in the fridge and then,
Oh my
use
God.
it because there's milk left over in there. It's still safe and okay to use for a while, right?
So I think that would have definitely saved me a lot of washing, which is I think was one of the bigger cons of exclusively pumping. But what I liked what you mentioned about the predictability, like knowing exactly how much your baby is drinking. The other kind of predictability I also enjoyed was knowing when I had to pump. I had a full-on like pumping routine, and I had communicated to my husband and to my nanny, and I was like, listen, this is the time that I need to be pumping. So the rest of you, like, you'd kind of need to carve out this like half an hour. I remember it used to be 6 in the morning, then 9, then 12, then 3, then 6 again. And then I would pump again at like 10 p.m., 3 a.m., and then 6 in the morning again. Like, that was kind of my pumping schedule. And I kept to this schedule for a good 3 months. And that kind of really helped me not only get a great milk supply, but also make it very predictable for me. Like, I like the fact that, when it's like 6, 9 a.m., I know it's my time to sit down, watch an episode of Friends, and just
That's exactly
relax.
what I did. Remember, I would just lock myself in the room and I'm like, see you guys in 20 minutes because that's how long it would take me to pump. Like I'd do. Then I would just sit, watch 20 minutes of Friends, and then I'd be good to go. And I had enough milk, but I didn't have that much extra because I was doing for 2. So I always have like a few feeds extra. So I just planned it in that way. So even just being a few feeds ahead helped me in case they suddenly needed an extra feed or so.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll tell you a very underrated advantage of exclusively pumping and having that schedule is that occasionally I could enjoy a glass of wine because, they say that after you have a drink, like if it's like one drink, you need to wait for 2 hours before you can feed. The thing is, because I was pumping, what I used to do was like, I had that 6 p.m. pump, right? So I would just do my pumping at 6, and then I would sit down with a glass of wine at 6:30 with my husband, even if it was just for like 10, 15 minutes. It was just that peaceful time. I'd be like, you know what? My next pump is at 9 o'clock. This will be out of my system by then. I was very assured. Like, I checked with my pediatrician. I checked with the lactation consultant at that point. They said, it's okay. Like, I wouldn't say every day, but like, on a Friday night when you're just chilling and you want to have a drink with your husband or with your friends, like, that was a great way for me to manage that.
Exactly. Yeah. No, I would do the same. When you're talking about how it gave us time, like I remember even at night, then people who were able to help me and just bottle feed, so it is a lot. The nights can get a bit tricky, right? Because you
like to could share the load of the night time, at least partially.
Yeah.
Somebody
It's
could
not
take
all on
over with the
you.
bottle. And I think that felt really good. Which pump did you use?
So I use the Medela Symphony. So it's a hospital grade pump because I remember in the beginning I had the regular Medela portable one, and I felt it was taking forever. Like 45 minutes, and I didn't feel I was getting enough milk. So, and then, my breasts were getting very sore very quickly. So then my friend was like, just get this hospital grade. It's life changing. So, like, I went there and then they help you figure out the parts. And, it was like a machine next to my bed. And that noise still haunts me sometimes, because it has that very strong noise. But it was, oh my God, it was like the best thing ever. Like, it was so quick. In 20 minutes, I was done. So I used that, and you can rent it. So which one did you use? You said you had two, right?
Yes, I had 2 pumps. So the one I used, like, it's supposed to be, it's called an hospital grade pump, but I don't think it's as powerful as a Medela Symphony. But the one I had at home was a Spectra S2. Did want to be a little bit more mobile. Like, I think with the Spectra, you just literally have to just sit there. You can't walk around too much. You can't be in the kitchen. You can't go for a walk or something. So then I invested in a wearable pump. So it's the kind that literally just inserts right into your bra. It looks weird. Right. It looks like you've got coconuts on your chest. It's doing its job while you could be playing with the baby, you could be cooking, you can go for a walk literally if you don't mind. I think the wearable pump that I got, it was this Chinese brand called Yuha. I read pretty good reviews about it. It was very easily available in Singapore. I think the topmost wearable brand, pump brand worldwide is LV. But that cost $700. Okay. And I was like, yeah, I think for a pump that I'm planning to use only twice a day, I do not want to spend so much money on a wearable pump. So then that's the combination of pumps that I used. I went through a pretty extensive research process for finding the pump as well. And I tell you, the main things that I saw, it should be a closed system pump. In my spectra, between the flange and the tube, there was this there's this barrier in the middle. It was the backflow protector prevents the milk from going back in the tube because those tubes are really hard to clean. So that is one thing that you have to look out for. The other one is that it should have a bunch of suction settings because you will need different ones and you will need to be able to kind of customize it to yourself. And the third thing is try to find something that is battery operated. Don't get a plug in the wall kind of pump because then you're literally stuck to a place where there has to be a power outlet. So as much as possible, get something that is battery operated. Whether it's big or small, you can decide. But getting a battery operated one with a good, decent battery backup is important.
From my experience, I would tell parents is that everything, and just before you deliver, just kind of understand how it works. Because as I told you, I was freaking out that night because I didn't understand this is a flange, this is a valve, this is a wire. I wish I had just kind of known the basics. So it's always good to familiarize yourself with it beforehand. It really helps. And when it came to the pumping experience, do you have any pain or what was your experience with it?
I think the first time I started pumping, at least the first week, the word to describe it was weird. The sensation of your breast being pulled into this flange while you're pumping and there's milk shooting out of it and you look at it and you feel it. You're just this feels really weird. I didn't even know that my body was capable of it. It was actually the time that I discovered that milk doesn't come from one hole. Oh my God, that was did you know this? The nipple, it's kind of like a shower. There are multiple holes that the milk is coming out of. And I was like, what? My body can do this? So I think I wouldn't say it was painful, but it was just a very weird sensation. Over time, when I kind of acclimatized to the suction setting that I wanted for the massage mode as well as for the suction mode, when I kind of realized this is what I'm comfortable with, then it started getting quite easy. It became BAU. I didn't even realize half the time when I was pumping, I was quite busy doing other things and stuff, and it just kind of went on in the background. How was it? What did you find it painful?
Oh, I think because in the beginning I was trying to figure out the settings. So as you mentioned, there's different settings in terms of the speed. You see, as a first-time mom, you don't really know what's happening. So I think because of that, I did get mastitis. That's what it's called, right? I got to call a lactation consultant to come see me, and I remember it was the most painful thing. It was more painful than even giving birth because then you take an epidural at that point because literally she's massaging your breasts and trying to get all those blocked milk sections out, and it was so painful. I remember I was screaming at the top of my lungs. So I had to call her twice because she was like, you know what, your flange is not correct, the speed you're doing it at is not correct. So I actually kind of wish I knew how to figure that out before, so I didn't have to deal with those two moments of that. But I think a lot of moms go through that, right, where they get mastitis or they get the blocked ducts because of exclusive.
I mean, yes, Sanju, you're right. Getting mastitis and blocked ducts is absolutely possible, even if you're exclusively pumping. Imagine if you're nursing and your baby has a poor latch and is not able to transfer milk properly, then that's what can give you a blocked duct, right? The same thing that can happen for pumping if your flange doesn't fit you properly. So if you're a mom who's listening to this episode, we don't want you to face the same issues we did. So listen up. So when it comes to the flange, it comes in different sizes. It's usually 18 mm, 20 mm, 22, 24, 26. These are the standard mm sizes available. And what that flange basically measures in mm is the size of your nipple, not the areola, just the nipple, and you literally need to take a ruler and measure it. Now, the funny thing is that most pumps come with a standard 24 flange. And what I was reading about is that 24 flange is typically too big for most women. So, most of the time, like if you're buying a pump, you must measure it and get the flange in your size that is compatible with your pump in advance. Because if you use the wrong flange size, then the same thing, like if you're using something that's too big, too much of your nipple will be pulled in, and then that's going to cause like pain. And if you're using something that is too small, then again, it's just the nipple that gets pulled in, not the areola. And again, that's going to cause pain and not enough output of the milk that leads to all these issues. So please get the flange size evaluated. There could be other issues with your pump settings, like, whether or not you're using the massage mode whether or not you're using the massage mode correctly or the suction mode correctly, the duration of your pumps. So these are things that you could figure out with a bit of trial and error. I think that's what I did. Like I did a bit of trial and error. For you, you had a lactation consultant come in and help you. I think just choose the right path, but make sure that you're getting the information that you need to make sure that you don't have like a uncomfortable experience. It shouldn't be painful. It could feel weird, but it shouldn't feel painful.
Yeah. And remember that also for me, I don't know if this happened with you, but like I started with one size and then like your breast size kind of changes also. So I remember I had to switch to another flange. So just keep an eye out if at certain points you feel like you're not getting the right amount of milk or so. Just reassess the sizing, because I did switch it like once or twice between sizes as well during the process.
I'm sure that can happen. Your breast change, like the physiology changes
Yeah.
during the course of breastfeeding. So why can't it happen while pumping as well?
So, Rennie, I wanted to ask you because you were mentioning about how you had oversupply. Because for me, I had like an extra supply for maybe a day or two. So I just kind of keep it in the fridge and go ahead with that. Now, Rennie, since you had an oversupply, how did you manage storing the breast milk?
Okay, so I think firstly, like because of my regular pump schedule, I worked myself into an oversupply because I was pumping 7 to 8 times a day, 30 minutes at a time. It was also because of the fact that my baby actually didn't eat that much. Like she was definitely on the lower end of how much babies tend to eat. She still is. Like she doesn't eat like a lot. So I think that's where I was like, oh my God, I have so much milk. Like there was this one time in which the entire like half of the top shelf of my fridge was lined with breast milk bottles. So I'm like, okay, I need to figure out a way to kind of do this better. So then I started reading about the fact, can the left and right breast be mixed? The answer is yes. Can you mix milk from different pumping sessions? The answer is yes. Can you mix the milk from day and night? And there's some new research that shows that the night milk has more melatonin and the day milk has more cortisol. But while it may be true, the amount of melatonin and cortisol in that milk doesn't make that much of a difference. So yes, you can mix your day and night milk as well. Right? If you want to be really strict about it, sure, keep night milk and feed it at night, and day milk and keep it in the day. But I just stopped caring about all of that. And then eventually I switched to a pitcher method, like where literally I had a pitcher, like a glass pitcher, and I just started pooling all the milk together. And then we started preparing bottles with that for the day. And then whatever extra milk I had, we used to put it in these freezer bags. And I clearly remember I started with the freezer bags from Pigeon, but they were leaking. So then I switched to the freezer bags from Lancino, and those turned out to be much better. And then I used to freeze 4 ounces at a time because that's how little milk my baby used to eat per feed. So actually it is better to kind of freeze 4 ounces at a time, because then when you defrost it, you can't keep it for that long. And we don't want to waste the breast milk. So that's what we did. Like the day-to-day feeds, the milk went into the pitcher, and then the excess breast milk at the end of the day or at the end of 2 days, depending on when I was free to do the freezing, I used to label the bags, put 4 ounces at a time, put them flat in my freezer, like on top of the ice cube box, put it flat, let it freeze, and then I started adding it to like this basket I had created in the freezer. But I think for a mom who may not know like how long can you keep the milk for, because that is something that moms are normally concerned about, right? Like how long can I keep this milk for that I have just pumped? So there are some guidelines from the CDC that I would love to share with anybody who's listening to this episode. The first one is, if you have just pumped the breast milk, please know that it has antimicrobial properties in it. So you actually can keep it at the countertop, like basically outside, for up to 4 hours. But just a word of caution, this 4-hour room temperature guideline applies if your room is 25 degrees. If it's winter, sure, you can keep it for 4-5 hours on the counter. Nothing will happen to the milk. But if it's hot, then just put it in the fridge. So that's with fresh breast milk. Now, in the fridge, it can stay up to 4 days. So you can actually store breast milk in a pitcher, in a bottle, in a bag, in a cup, however ever you want to store it. Keep a sterilized bottle or a cup. Store breast milk in that up to 4 days at the back of the refrigerator, not in the door. I used to store it in the door until I read that the temperature change at the door is just too much every time you open and close the fridge. So you want to store it all the way to the back of the fridge. And then when it comes to the freezer, then you can store breast milk up to 6 months in the freezer and up to 12 months if you have a deep freezer. I don't know how cold deep freezer is, probably less than -4 degrees, because our freezers are usually at -4, 0 to -4 degrees. So that is the guideline that I followed. Sanch, I'll tell you, there was a catch in this, okay? Because at one point, I had a good 4 to 5 liters of breast milk in the freezer. The top shelf of my freezer was just taken up with breast milk bags. And that was the time I sort of decided that I think I'm going to start dropping pumping sessions, because I didn't need that much milk anymore. I already had a bit of a stash created. So then I started dropping it from 7 sessions to 6 to 5 to 4. When I came down to 4 sessions, I finally started using 1 bag a day, which is just 1 feed a day from my freezer stash. And that's when I got a reality check. Did you know that breast milk can change taste if it's frozen?
So did you felt she noticed that?
My baby actually had a tough time drinking my freezer stash, which I had worked so hard to build. I read about this much later, is that there is this enzyme called lipase. So a lipase is basically an enzyme that breaks down fat. Some mothers, the milk they produce has a very high lipase activity. That enzyme is a little too active. And the way it breaks down the fat, it actually gives the milk a bit of a metallic, soapy taste. And I did taste it, and I was like, oh my God, the breast milk used to taste so sweet when it was fresh, and now it tastes a bit soapy. And my baby was sensitive to it. In the end, we still gave her the frozen breast milk by mixing it with fresh. So we kind of used to prepare a feed of a bit of fresh, a bit of frozen, and we used that frozen breast milk. But then later on, I discovered that there is a way of reducing that. So again, this is to moms who are watching this episode. Firstly, you want to test out freezing 1 bag of your breast milk and then defrosting it and then checking what is it like. Does the taste change, or does it stay the same or similar? If it stays the same, you're good to go. If the breast milk taste changes for you, that means you have a very high lipase activity. You need to what is called scalding your breast milk. I wish, again, I had known this, then I wouldn't have to go through all this trouble of trying to use the freezer stash. So how the scalding of the breast milk works is literally you have to take a clean pan, preferably stainless steel, heat it up a fairly medium heat kind of a thing. Put your breast milk in it. As long as it sizzles and it has a slight boil to it, so switch it off. You don't want to boil the milk, you don't want to get it to a rolling boil. But what you want to do is that you want to heat up the breast milk to a certain level. I can't remember the exact temperature, but I used to measure the temperature later on as well. And then switch it off and let it cool down, and then you refrigerate it. So what that does is that it kills that lipase enzyme in it and kind of lowers the activity, so that when you do go ahead and freeze it, it doesn't change the taste.
So you mean first, you don't put it directly in the freezer, you have to keep it in the fridge first, or you can also just put it directly in the freezer once this process is done?
Okay, so if you are scalding the breast milk, then it's better to first cool it to room temperature outside, then put it in the fridge, then put it in the freezer. I think when you do this, it kind of reduces the temperature gradient that the milk has to go through. Actually, anyways, they say that even if you're putting freshly pumped breast milk without scalding, if you're putting it in the freezer, you ideally still should put it in the fridge first. Let it come to a fridge temperature, which is about 4 degrees, and then put it in the freezer instead of putting directly in the freezer. So, these are also things that I learned.
So if, for example, I have breast milk in the fridge and it's been 4 days, right? Because you said for 4 days it can be in the fridge. Now, it's been 4 days, but I have that milk. It's okay to transfer that to the freezer then, right? That's what you were
Yes, you can.
saying
Yeah, you can
you were
extend the
doing as
life of
well.
that
Okay,
milk for
got it.
6 months by putting it in the freezer.
And
So
what if so if I prepare 6 ounces for a baby, okay? So I took it out of the fridge, I warmed it up, I gave the baby 6 ounces. Now the baby has left 2 ounces. Do you have any tips of what moms can do with that? If it's already been in the fridge, is there anything we can do with it once you've reheated it?
okay, so the thing with leftover breast milk is that first of all, any mom who has had leftover breast milk, it stings their heart because like, oh my god,
Exactly.
I worked so hard for it. Please drink it. It's liquid gold, literally, right? The CDC guideline over here, it says that if there is an unfinished bottle of breast milk, then you need to re-offer it within 2 hours, and you can keep that bottle in the fridge for those 2 hours. But within 2 hours of starting that feed, you
Yeah.
need to get them to finish it. If they don't finish it, then discard the milk. The thing with that guideline is that it's a very conservative guideline. When we go back and look at the data, there was some data that was also published by Emily Oster, and what she mentioned from the studies is that if you do keep the milk back in the fridge, you can't keep it for like a day, but more than 2 hours is okay. You probably can feed it in the next feeding. Let's say the next feeding is probably about 3 hours away. You can offer that leftover 2 ounces over there. Let's say it's much more than that. Your baby is still not accepting that milk. Then what you can do is what you said earlier. You can add it to their bath water. You can,
Yes.
you can put it on their
Massage,
hair,
yeah.
massage it. You can even put it on your own nipples if it's like cracking, bleeding, hurting, right? You can reoffer it as much as possible. If they don't take it, then no choice, use it elsewhere.
Can I tell you what I've used it for? So I
Yeah.
have gotten calls with people who've had fever, and they've taken my breast milk and they put it on their kids, and it's happened like 2 3 people used it, and apparently breast milk can bring down someone's fever. So people have used my breast milk to bring down their fever, and it actually worked. Apparently it's a thing.
Wow.
I was like, okay, sure, I have extra.
On the other hand, I did come across a news recently where bodybuilders are buying breast milk on the black market. It's like instead of drinking a protein shake, they're buying breast milk and they're drinking that after workouts. Like, what?
And now they're selling colostrum as powders, like for people, and they're saying it's good for your health and stuff. You know, that first milk that comes out, and like not from humans, but from animals and stuff.
It's an animal colostrum. I was like, who the hell is donating their human colostrum? Like what is where is this coming from?
Yeah.
You know, but like you mentioned that you had just enough for your babies, right? Was there ever a time that you were kind of getting worried about your supply, and did you do anything to kind of improve your supply while pumping?
Yeah, so for me, what really helped was a lot of hydration. I had a lot of the Indian spices, which actually I felt really helped. I used something called Satavarix, which was a powder I'd added in my oats. So I think the main thing really is to just stay hydrated, to eat nutritious meals, and then also have that time to rest and have a good schedule. But I do feel the supplements and the Satavarix and all these spices actually helped, because it was just helping my body recover. So it was giving me that energy, that hydration to actually produce them.
I took fenugreek supplements for a bit. Honestly, I don't know how much of it helped, but there was this time where I felt like my supply was like dwindling because like the amount of milk I was getting per feed wasn't the same. Then again, I came across this something called power pumping.
What's that?
Okay, so power pumping is really interesting, and it's a fantastic way of improving your milk supply, whether you're exclusively pumping or nursing or whatever it is, the combination that you're doing. So what power pumping does is that it kind of mimics how your baby feeds during a growth spurt or during a cluster feeding session, where they feed a bit, rest a bit, feed a bit, rest a bit, feed a bit, rest a bit. So that is what power pumping kind of mimics. So how it works is you sit down to pump and you carve out 1 hour for this process instead of the typical 20-30 minutes. And what you do is you sit down, you pump for 20 minutes, and then you rest for 10 minutes, and then you pump for 10 minutes, and then you rest for 10 minutes, and then you pump for 10 minutes again. And that kind of concludes this whole 1 hour long session. I did this for about a week every day, like in my evening pump, like that 9 p.m. pump. Once my kid had gone to sleep already, I had about an hour from between 9 and 10 o'clock. I used to do power pumping for about a week. And oh my God, it made the world of a difference to my milk supply, because the very next day I could start seeing that okay, yes, the output was back to where it used to be. So something anybody can try. Doesn't matter whether you're exclusively pumping or only partially pumping. I hope everybody who is listening today and watching us, I hope you were able to get a good idea of what exclusive pumping is all about, the benefits that it can offer you. And if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments below and we'll help you out as two moms who have been through this journey ourselves. So thank you so much for joining in, and we'll see you for the next episode.